Hi, everyone, and welcome to the sharing group, y'all. Today's lesson of A Course in Miracles is lesson 100, which states, my part is essential to God's plan for salvation. My part is essential to God's plan for salvation. And salvation is about perfect happiness, y'all. It's not about punishment, it's about perfect happiness. And after many years of struggle, my next guest ultimately turned her trauma into wisdom by healing herself and has stepped into her own joy and happiness. Sarah Grace, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive healer, and near-death experiencer, learned to embrace her intuitive gifts and abilities and is here to share with us her journey and how we can do the same. I'm so excited to speak with her. Sarah, thank you so much for joining the show. I
Hello,
can't,
Loretta. Hi, everybody watching. Thank you so much for having me here.
yes. And so I know that you have had spiritual experiences since you were 7. You were able to see and hear things. So you can start as early as that, but wherever you would like to start, we would love to hear about your experience.
Well, it's been quite the ride, just like for most everybody during this life period and cycle. It's so intense right now, right? So many people are waking up. And I loved your introductory lesson. I feel that it's very fitting for this conversation because my experience largely throughout my life, not understanding my intuitive sensitivities, my psychic abilities, navigating the world as a paramedic in California, and I'll share about all of that. But I didn't understand my part and I didn't understand my abilities, nor did I want them.
Yeah.
So my coming to terms with process has very much been my acceptance of my part in the overall plan. So I thought that that was perfect, of course. We know how this goes.
Girl, it always is perfect. The
Mhm.
lesson is always appropriate to the guest. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect. So I've been able to see, hear, and feel energy outside of the normal senses since I was 7. I grew up in a tiny town in South Dakota, surrounded by the Standing Rock Indian Reservation pre-internet. Zero outside access, 2 hours from the closest Walmart or shopping mall or anything, McDonald's even.
Wow.
It was like so far out. And that's relevant because I didn't have any lifeline or way to understand why I was seeing and feeling what I was. So one day I just went to bed. I was a kid, normal kid, just like anybody. And I remember waking up one day when I was 7, and it started with auric field colors. So if you think about
Mhm.
a street light at nighttime, the little halo, it's like that, but it's around every person, animal, plant, whatever.
Wow.
And then from there, it graduated into more kind of tracers, and then I'd feel everybody's feelings and I knew what they were thinking. And then it went into being able to see if people were being honest or deceptive and disease in their bodies. And then it went on to seeing spirits. And I was just like, what? Here I am, a kid, middle of nowhere, no outside influence. And unfortunately, it's all perspective, right?
Mhm.
I came from a very conservative family, and it was also highly dysfunctional. So there was a lot of violence and a lot of chaos and instability. And so I didn't feel initially safe talking about, like, hey, why am I seeing these things? Do you guys see these things too? And I just hoped that they would go away.
Mhm.
So after 2 weeks, and the sensation was not going away, so I finally said something to a family member, and they did the hellfire and brimstone. Don't talk about this. We'll send you to a loony bin. And I remember that moment distinctly because that was a pivotal moment in my life, marking a sense of toxic shame that began
Mhm.
my long journey into finally recovering and becoming empowered with my abilities. But again, here we are as kids. We just want to be safe and loved and accepted by
Mhm.
our family. And now I'm being told that like there's something mentally wrong and I can't talk about this part of myself. And that's so highly identifiable for so many people, right? If even if
Mhm.
it's not about sensitivities, about that sense of insecurity, not fitting in, not belonging, and having a sense of shame
Yeah.
of different, right?
Mhm.
So I closed down and I contracted and I got really scared. Initially through high school, I really started to overachieve. That was my coping mechanism. And then the violence and chaos continued. My mom died abruptly when I was 17, right after my graduation.
Mm.
And then I went way off the rails with drugs and alcohol at that point. So
Yeah.
post high school into college, and, again, just looking for a sense of safety, trying to control it, trying to numb out.
Yeah.
Because again, my everyday experience is being awash in this sensory data and information at any given time. So, if you go like the back of Walmart or Best Buy or whatever, and they got that wall of TV screens, and
Yeah.
they're all playing like whatever. So if you stand in the center and you're focused on the center screen, that's this reality to me.
Mm.
At any given time, I've got 15 different screens
Mm.
that are blaring this data and information at me. And so it can be very challenging to stay grounded, not get like really
Yeah.
disassociated, kind of overwhelmed by that. That's just the visual. And then the feeling for those empaths out there, we all
Yeah.
know what this
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
feeling everything so deeply. And it's just this very intense sensory experience 24/7, 365 for me.
Wow.
So my experience was of trying to numb out, just trying to make sense of the volatility, not having like a safe nuclear family dynamic, not having
Mhm.
structure, not having that like where somebody's like, oh, I got your back, like I was always kind
Right.
of left out there flapping in the wind trying to figure it all out. And so my experience took me through addiction, drugs, alcohol, and I actually overdosed and had my own near-death experience.
Wow.
And that was age, I think I was like 19, 20. That was another pivotal moment for me because it was literally obviously the wake-up call, right? And I was like, I'm good. I'm wrapped. Like, screw that. I don't want to live. Like, no, I'm not into that. It's too much. It's too much. I don't want to do it. But in that heightened state of the near-death experience, my experience was like being in kind of a golden honey-like mandala shaped kind of cocoon. It just felt really nurturing and supportive and loving. And I had heard a female voice say, and I believe it was either my higher self or a guide. I get asked
Mhm.
a lot, but essentially, like, we know it's been hard. She was way more eloquent than I'm going to be. It was just like, we know
Mhm.
it's been hard, but if you choose to go back, you're going to help a bunch of people with this. And I was like, floating out there, thinking like, oh, this just feels so good. It feels so
Mhm.
peaceful. I feel so accepted, and like that pain is gone.
Yeah.
Then I was really feeling into like, oh, okay, I can help a bunch of people. So obviously, I chose to
To come.
come back, not knowing that I would have to do the boots on ground, heavy lifting of cleaning up my life and taking responsibility for my behaviors and healing my traumas and facing all of the sensitivities head on. And so after I did all of that, and we can talk more in depth about how and what and whatever, but eventually I got cleaned up and became a paramedic in California. And so I used
Okay.
those abilities that I'd been resisting and fighting forever in people's worst moments. And
Mm.
I became a midwife for death.
Mm.
And, and it was so beautiful to be able, it's such an honor to be able to be there in those moments and really watch kind of what happens during the transition, or what I call graduation process of death.
Mm. Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for deciding to come back Sarah Grace, thank you for deciding to come back. Almost every guest I have, we have all had experiences where we were not validated as kids. It's really interesting to me how often that is. And so I'm excited now about how we get to change that. Like the new parents who wake up, right, get to change and really validate the experiences that our kids have.
Mhm.
Just because it's beyond our understanding doesn't mean that they don't have valid experiences. So, thank you for sharing that. What would you say? And I know you have a very rich experience. We have a lot to talk about. What would you say was one of the main factors that helped you heal yourself after you had the NDE and you had the drug addiction and everything? What was kind of like your anchor to help you get out of that and recover?
Number 100% hands down is personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I was so angry and like justifiably so. If we look back at my lived history, I think people could understand or empathize. So, yeah, we get it why she
Yeah.
was on that path. And I was so mad about the sensory experience. But essentially, I got sick and tired of myself saying and feeling and doing the same things. And
Yeah.
yes, my pivotal moment, and I made my choice to come back. But I had to get myself cleaned up. I had to look at what I was doing. And I was really pissed off. I didn't like life. I felt like I was owed something because of what I had been through.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had this anger from the stimulus. I just wanted to be left alone, right? And I had to deal with all of that. And the bottom line just kept coming circling back like, yes, that happened, but what are you going to do with it now? And one of my key, I'll never forget as long as I live, was like I was just so mad about all of the stimulus bombardment. And I just had this knowing, and it was like, you can be mad all you want to, but it's still going to be like this. So what are you going to do about it? It's up to me to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get over my righteousness and my sense of I'm owed something and my sense of like the victimization that can be so intoxicating, right? It's just so like it's right there. It's so much easier to go down into that victim because then we're not accountable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We see this culturally throughout what's happening societally right now, and it's everybody's doing what they're doing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But in the long haul, staying in that victim mindset to me is actually harder because as we assume responsibility and as we're like, oh, that sucked. Whoo, now I got to deal with it. Like, how do I deal with this? Uh, then we dig into it and then we find the wisdom in it and then we find the healing and then we transmute that darkness or pain or chaos or
Mm-hmm.
destruction and we alchemize it into light consciousness, into wisdom, into health,
Yeah.
clarity, and it becomes part of our power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy. And I found that it's it's uncomfortable for a shorter duration if you're willing to just say, all right, screw it. I'm sick of myself saying this crap and feeling the same way and doing the same shit. Like I gotta do
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right? But it really boils down to decision and being willing to look at ourselves and be like, yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
All of that happened. All of that is valid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You gonna do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You want to do with it. Because that's the choice point right there. And I've personally found whether it be behavioral stuff or addictive stuff or even navigating the sensitivities, the more willing I am to stay first person and just kind of be like, okay, I see that. Ooh, oh, I'm getting triggered by that. Oh, there's that, right? But
Yeah.
I stay
Yeah.
with myself and be like, what is this for me? Why am I being triggered? What is this? Then there's this invitation to, again, it's to me, It's about more integrating more personal power, more wisdom, more health, more vitality.
Girl, you are all over the Course in Miracles principles. You really are. Ah,
Nice.
yes, personal responsibility and not having a victim mentality. But one of the things that you said, Sarah Grace, which is significant, is validating your feelings at the time, right? Allowing that space to say, sure, I did go down this path, and here is why. Here's how I dealt with my pain. Here's how I dealt with the experiences that I had to face. To me, that is an essential part of that healing because only until we do that, and love all of us, right? Then we can step into that space of, okay, and now here is my part in healing that trauma. But it is significant to not just bypass it or act like, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. No, I feel like this for a reason. So
Mhm.
I love that. I love that. Take us to, it's so juicy. Take us to your experience as a paramedic. What a rich experience to have psychic abilities, right? Wow, you're doing that work while people are transitioning and others maybe not. And I've heard you talk about that you would interact with the soul that may be transitioning. Please tell us about that.
Well, I took to it like a duck to water, not knowing that the psychic aspect was going to play out at all. Intuitively, after my overdose and getting cleaned up, every time an ambulance would go by, I'd have this kind of knowing, you should go do that. But I was really frightened of it because
Okay.
I didn't understand that, I was like, I could kill somebody. I don't know how to be a paramedic. But there's in just like anything in life. And so if anybody's like on the fence with making a decision moving forward, like I'm too old or I don't know how or whatever, just there's one step at a time to get you
Yeah.
right where you ultimately want to be. So lean into that intuitive knowing. And the 911 system, first off, we as first responders are a different breed. We're running toward what everybody else is running away from.
Yeah.
We're very intense. We're type A. We're very alpha, and we're very autonomous. So I understand that my upbringing prepared me perfectly because
Mm,
I started in South Central Los Angeles and then I went up to the Bay Area in California and ultimately outside of Sacramento. So 15 years of 911 in California. And it was so familiar to my nervous system that I was
mm,
just like, oh yeah, I got this. Like, and anatomically, like seeing whatever I was seeing, it became like puzzle pieces that we had to put back together really quickly. So I found that personality wise, I was already kind of hardwired for it. And for once, because most of my life I didn't feel that I belonged anywhere.
mhm,
And of first responders, they're probably the place I felt that I fit the most because of my intensity and not just the way that we are. And at the
mhm.
same time, I still didn't fully fit because now I'm this weird girl who sees dead people, right?
I love
And
it.
so here I am with all these SWAT dudes. Like these guys are like as alpha as they come, and I'm not gonna want to be like, oh, do you see that dead kid? And I
Right.
didn't want to be weird, so I was still really closeted at the initial stages, probably for the first 10 years, because I still didn't know
Wow.
what it was, why it was. But my experience would be we would go, and I became the paramedic who was just always there for death, like anything really crazy going down, and I was going to be one of the ones there. And my experience would slow down and expand just like the Matrix. And I would get out and I'd hear my boots hit the ground, everything would just crystalline. And then I could see and feel everything simultaneously. And I knew what was going to happen 2 or 3 paces. So everything to me slowed down, but my movements were real time. And I was being fed a streamline of what was coming,
Mm,
just claircognizance and precognition, right? And then I'd be able to act on the physical body. And so that was my lived felt experience. And being there for death just became like it was a rite of passage. It was a beautiful space and very much like becoming a midwife because I could see the physical body, whether it's, on the street post drive-by or it's a school shooting or it's crumpled in a car and the physical body is there, but the soul of the person would be standing next to it, just totally
Mm.
confused. And so telepathically, so the soul looked to me like the physical person, except I could see through them. And in a trauma death, they're always looking around like, just think about it. You know, trauma death, you don't know you're going to die that day.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they have time, you guys. So please live your life now. This is my main message of everything. It's like, none of us know, none of us are guaranteed.
Wow.
So please live today. Okay. But
Wow.
I'd come on scene, I'd see the soul standing there, and I figured out telepathically that I could communicate with them while we started extricating or working on their body. And so over the course of time, I developed kind of this energetic triage. You're dead. We're going to pull your body out of the car. I'm going to start CPR and take you to the hospital. This is what's happening. So I'm telepathically rapid firing and working on the physical body. Right. And so for
So Sarah, while you're working on the individual that has, been in accident or whatever, you are intuitively knowing
Mhm.
whether they're going to make it or not. Because if you see their soul outside of the body, you already know this person is wow. But while
Mhm.
you're doing that, you're still doing the protocols of that's amazing. So what is some of the interactions you've had? You inform the soul, I guess if they're confused.
Yeah,
How do
so
you do that?
yeah, it was very much like just being an energetic paramedic. And I was talking to them just like they're still alive because it's a person. They're just not in their body. It's a consciousness.
Wow.
Let's just shed the heavy coat, right? And medical death is similar, but the auric field expands. This is like hospice or end stage disease. It's not traumatic, it's expected. So there's a dilation of the field. And so people start, it's very common. They have their NDEs, they have their astral travel, they see their deceased relatives, and they start communicating. It's a thinning of the veil,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In the moments of death there, it's beautiful because the chakras unfurl like a ribbon and the consciousness goes
Wow.
out the front of the head. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's
Wow.
really beautiful to witness because those guys are usually greeted by loved ones, deceased loved ones. And so with them, we'd be called in to do a declaration of death. Like we're not going to run a CPR on a hospice person, patient, but I would see the deceased family like having a little reunion up in the corner of the room,
That's
right?
so cool.
And on the trauma calls, I would rapid fire like communicate to them, but 9 times out of 10, a celestial, an angel would come. And it would change the dynamic of the entire scene.
Wow.
As you can imagine, you got all of us working really quickly. There's a lot of like people screaming and whatever's happening. And then a celestial would just right in the center and just appear like fireflies. I never saw wings on
Okay.
an eagle. They're very tall, 8 to 10 feet, sometimes 12, kind of a cobalt blue silver, very androgynous, very exquisitely beautiful.
Mm.
But this calm, reverent, nurturing love that just blankets everything like a fresh snow, and everything just goes like muted. And then the person who had just died would look at that and just slowly start to just go into an embrace with them. And
Wow.
I saw that time after time after time, and then they would disappear in a little flash, and I'd be like, okay. And then I knew for sure that person was dead.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. What a beautiful visual. So, Sarah, tell us, have you ever had someone, like say maybe car accident or whatever, and they are out of their body, the body is not going to make it, but they are afraid to transition because maybe they're afraid because of maybe judgment of what they've done in their life. Have you had interaction with them to help them go to the light?
Yes, it's that was one of my most challenging things to witness and to see was a few times, not all that often, fortunately, but the few times where there was maybe it was an incineration or a car accident, I would witness the soul clamoring and trying really hard to climb back in to the body, which was obviously gut wrenching to see, right? Because we were working with whatever it was we were working with, and I had a sense of knowing that they weren't going to be able to. It was their time. And
Yeah.
so very hard to see, very unnerving, and it took me like some time to process through the times that I did see that. But it wasn't like they were just swept away into some darkness or they just like, it was really methodical. And that my understanding is in traumas, the celestials come in to bring a frequency to calm the soul enough to kind of be like, wait, what? Okay, hold on. And even if they're not fully accepting of crossing over, going to the light, right? Just transitioning in consciousness is really what that means to me, then the soul would essentially be put and would be like an ICU, but it was in kind of an in between here and crossing over, transitioning. And that ICU would almost like be put in a pod until the soul could come to terms with and
Mm.
have acceptance. And then they would go into being greeted by family, loved ones, pets, or religious deities or archetypes, and then they go into life review, and then it's kind of a process. But again, you guys, death is scary for us as humans because one, we want to feel valid and like we matter. Two, we like to feel like we have control, which we don't, but we want to feel like we do. Right? And the sense of death, impermanence, not knowing what happens goes into that uncertainty, which we don't tend to resonate with. So, as someone who's seen death repeatedly, one, it's totally natural. It's completion of the birth death cycle of nature in this dimension. Two, there's nothing to fear in it. It's like taking off a heavy coat. Even if there's pain in circumstance of death, it's brief compared to what the soul then they shed the physical body, and there's still the awareness of self without that pain or the heaviness. Three, we're never alone in death. I have never seen anyone just like, I've never seen demons come and snatch people. I've never seen dark stuff come and snatch people. And I've always seen loved ones. I've always seen pets. I've always seen there was something or someone to facilitate and midwife. So nothing to fear in death. Please live now.
Wow. That was beautiful. I can like really pick up on people healing from that. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. Did your colleagues ever, and this is probably common whether you're psychic or not, where you pick up on an energy, like maybe when the celestial beings would show up, where they would pick up on this higher vibration? How did they, and did they notice something different with you? Like, how did that? Because you kind of didn't understand it, but you knew you were having these like these extra sensory experiences. How did that come about? Like, did they have questions for you? Did they pick up on something that you knew, something they didn't know?
It picked up initially on the fact that I always was the one who got the really gnarly calls. And then when the more that we worked together and the more I was really quiet about it for a long time, but I was just watching the whole, it's like a symphony, right? Of all of these energies happening on a call. And I kept watching it over and over and over and over and over. And then I started to kind of notice similarities. Oh, did you see what happened with that? The medical death and how that was similar that time. And I started to kind of formulate for myself of like, wait, there's something bigger happening
Yeah,
here. There's something
yeah,
divine that's playing out, right?
yeah.
And what we're doing is just showing up to kind of facilitate. And over time, as I started to participate more with and be more open to the energies, it became more palpable. So they could feel and they'd be like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know, 'cause I still wasn't in the place of understanding, like, oh, I see stuff because of clairvoyance, right? Or I hear stuff because of clairaudience, or like, this is what this is, and this is why, and this is how you deal with it in real life. And this is like, I didn't know any of that yet. And so that became kind of my next mission, was learning and becoming empowered with all of that. But I
Oh,
do have to tell you, there
mhm.
are a lot there are quite a few first responders come to find out that are like me. I've had people reach out. It's been really cool because here I thought I was this lone weirdo my whole life, right? And that's not the case. And there's tons of nurses. Oh my gosh, super sensitives, right? And even some physicians that have come talk to me since I've really come out with this. So it's pretty cool.
That is cool. That is cool. Tell us about, okay, so tell us about you had a call where you received about a SIDS baby and you said that was a turning point for you. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yes, so I was cruising along. I'd done like a lot of these deaths for a long time and I was getting more familiar with it, but nobody, it was a 3 week old baby, SIDS, near SIDS. And that firefighter comes running out of the house with his eyeballs this big around, holding a kid the size of a Cabbage Patch doll, and just like hot potatoes me this dead kid. And I don't care who you are. Like, I'm super seasoned paramedic by this time. I've got so much time under my belt and so many calls, but you're still a human, right? Like, I'm not.
Absolutely.
And I was like, what is this? And like, I just froze for a second. And in that moment, I felt this energy come and just knock me out of the way. And myself, Sarah, went up to the top of the ambulance and I was watching this energy running this call through my body. And like, we got the baby to the hospital and the baby made it. And
Mhm.
SIDS is really just an opt-out period where the soul can come in and kind of stick their toe in and be like, no, just kidding. We're gonna cycle back later, maybe not, right? But it's traumatic for
Yeah,
parents.
absolutely.
It's one of the like really hardest calls for us to run. And so we got the baby to the hospital, and that was the turning point for me because by this stage I was cool with the energies kind of coming over the top, or I would know what was going to happen, or I could see it, but I was not all right having something knock me out of the way. Like,
Yeah, did it knock you out of your
I'm
body?
a control freak, right? I'm like, no, no, that's not gonna work for me. And so I was like, all right, I don't know what this is, but that's not gonna work for me. And
Mhm.
so I need to get a handle on this. I need to understand what it is and why. And that was my pivot point because I was still stalling and I resisted, even though I've been like this my whole life.
Mhm.
Going all the way back. I had already done some healing work by this point, but then I just got busy being a paramedic and having my kids and doing the thing, doing the life thing.
Yeah.
And still a lot of that toxic shame very deep
Mm.
that needed to be addressed. There was still a lot of fear of my gifts and what they meant or what the responsibilities were that come with them. But that was the pivot point. And finally, I was like, all right, it's time.
I gotta ask, do you know the purpose of you being knocked out of your body? Like what was the intention? What happened? Do you know? That's very interesting.
I think that a higher consciousness, a very like loving presence was like, all right, just because I was frozen just for a nanosecond, I was in that like, what? And so because this is a critical 3 week old not breathing, gotta like, we gotta go, we gotta move on this like now. It just happened instantaneously. And it was everything was in divine perfection because everything was played out physically perfectly to reestablishing, pulse and getting the kid situated. And so I
So
think
Yeah, I'm sorry. This light, so this light being worked through you, like you continue to work on the baby, but it was through their consciousness because you kind of paused for it. Oh, that is fascinating.
That's my take with it. But that was the only time I've ever been knocked out. And I wasn't comfortable with it. But thank God it happened because it really got my attention enough to be like, okay. And I remember thinking, I was like, okay, they told me that I was going to get sent to a loony bin and I go to hell, right? For being this way. And that's a heavy thing to
Yeah.
shoulder for all those years. But here I am in people's worst moments, able to help in these ways that are like, you know, kind of a unique, specific thing. And
Mhm.
I was like, how could this be bad? That's when I started to challenge it. That's when I started. And it was like that little 7-year-old self was still really scared. We have these deep-seated wounds and shame. And to go stand up to that, whatever it is for the individual, whatever it is for you, and have the courage to be like, what if this isn't true?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's big stuff, right? That's like standing up to Goliath.
Yes.
We get so weak and insecure and vulnerable in there because it's so deep and it's so old. But if we just have that courage in that moment to just be like, wait, what if? And then for me, I started to think about all of the ways and all of these people that I've helped. And then I started to get curious. Okay, well, why do I see this? Why do I feel this? Why do I hear this? Why do I know this? Why do I see dead people? Why do I see dark stuff? What is this? And what am I supposed to do with it? Besides run 911, right? And yeah, then really went through my own personal shadow integration, trauma recovering integration. I had already faced addiction stuff. Um, I had a lot of judgment around the psychic world and I think it was projection coming from that wound, right? And at the same time, I'm just like super grounded and practical and paramedic-y. And so I like things to like really land in this reality. And I found that some of the spiritual stuff didn't make a lot of sense. They were nice words, but I was like, but what are you saying? What are we actually doing here? Right. And so I'm very pragmatic and practical. And so I just started like one step at a time, healing myself. And then, okay, well, learning to meditate, learning to feel the energy, learning about each ability, learning about mediumship, medical intuition. And fast forward now, I've got a full-time medical intuition and psychic surgery practice, and I've been doing that full-time for 10 years. It's just crazy how it all happens.
Tell us about that. Tell us about your practice now. Tell us about how you help people. First of all, I love and congratulate that you decided to become friends with your abilities. Like you finally got out of that space of resisting and resisting, where you finally decided, you know what, let me figure this out because this ain't going anywhere, and let me work with it. So I want to celebrate that you just you had that adjustment. And so where are you now? What is your practice? What is your ideal person that you work with? And tell us about where the space you're in now.
So I'm still very much a paramedic, but now I'm a paramedic for the soul, if you will. Very much energetic paramedics. So people come to me to overcome trauma and addiction. They've been to every doctor under the sun, every specialist, and they've gotten no answers.
Mm.
Energetically sensitive themselves and highly dysregulated or may not know how to work with their abilities. And so really anybody, it's totally wide open in terms of what the specific reason that they reach out is. It's kind of across the board, but still it's like a total life overhaul. And then through medical intuition and understanding what's happening with their physiology. And then psychic surgery it's quite intricate. It's a specialized branch of energy healing, but they're all branches of the same tree. It's right, all the same stuff, just different delineations of it. But the psychic surgery makes sense to me. If you think of it like a Western surgery, it's similar, but obviously I'm not manipulating or doing any physical surgical intervention. It's on their energy field. It's
Mm.
on the etheric template. But in layman's terms, it's like being pressure washed, roto-rooted, pulled out of the ditch, completely overhauled, triaged, stabilized, and given a protocol. Like, here's the next 3 to 6 months. This is what you do. Because I found that people are just so overwhelmed right now, right? That it's like they just don't know what to do and they can't get unstuck.
Yeah.
So there's very specific technical ways, but just say what it is and what we're actually up to, you know? But it's so important. I resisted because here I am, top dog, senior level medic, and my intuition's like, now you got to go be an energy healer. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, what? Hold on, hold on, what? No, like I'm doing this. This is what I'm doing. But I kept getting this knowing that I needed to go like learn about what energy healing is and how to do, sessions and these things. And I was so defiant and I was so resistant. And intuitively, I just kept getting more and more nudges, if you will, by the universe, because the universe will tap you for a second and you don't
Mhm.
listen and it'll shove you. And you don't listen, it's going to come 2 by 4 you. And so I knew that. And I was like, okay, I'll listen. But how I squared off, and I think this is important for whoever is listening, wherever they are in their lives, because all of us are facing our own individual scenarios, right?
Mhm.
Struggles, fears, overcoming rejections, overcoming old belief structures, limiting belief structures. And so my gifts and abilities are unique to me in the way that they are. And I really believe that each individual has a very unique skill set to them.
Mm.
It may be musical, it may be financial, it may be caretaking, it may be sensitive, like data information. It could be algorithms. I mean, there's all kinds of gifts and beauty. But I was so resistant because of all the things, projection, all whatever. But what I did was like when I finally was like, exactly that, this is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
This is what it is. What am I going to do with it? I'm being called to do this. And the pivotal thing for me, how am I going to make this work for me? I'll take all of that information that's out there and I'm going to take what resonates and let go of what doesn't. I'm going to maintain autonomy and personal power, yet being open to learning from multiple sources. I personally don't like to I'm not into guru syndrome or like giving my power away or any of that, because I think each of us has our own innate, incredible power and strength. And so, what I'm here to do is to help people remember who they are and how to reconnect to that and how to unlock that and how not to be scared of your own genius and your own power. Because, yes, we as humans can be frightened of failure, we can be frightened of darkness, but what we're really scared of is our own incredible power and what we're actually capable of doing.
I'm over here shouting. I am over here. Yes.
Right?
That's it. We are afraid of our own power. We're so used to being small, being conditioned into smallness, that we are afraid to demonstrate, accept, acknowledge our own personal power. I love, 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 love that. I do. Tell us about your book, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic. That's juicy. I
Okay.
love that kind of stuff. Tell us about it.
So, Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic, it was like giving birth to a porcupine. It was essentially putting in my own lived experience and coming to terms with process of being so sensitive
Yeah.
with actual 911 calls that I ran. So you can see in there, and it's two different timelines, but all of these different calls and how I used the abilities and how it kind of turned out. And the intuitively, this was part of going all the way back to my overdose when I had this knowing, if you lean into this, you're actually going to help a lot of people.
Mhm.
So I went through this process, and the reason it was like giving birth to a porcupine is one, it's not easy to write a book and like complete it, but two, all my dirt's in there. Like my intuition's like, put everything in there. And I was like, oh man, I did some stuff, really? Like everything? And they're like, everything in there. And I was like, oh. And so I did. And I'm so grateful that I did, because what's happened is I really feel that that has given people permission to be okay
Mhm.
with their own stuff,
Yeah.
looking at, whoa, if she was that and now she's okay, then I can do it too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I self-published the book, and it just took off and it never stopped. And so I've done all the big shows and the circuits and Gaia and Hay House and all the things, and it's beautiful. It's about consciousness. It's time. It's our time as sensitives to lean into our abilities. And this is why it's just out doing what it's doing, because it's just time. And we as sensitives are being called into our power. We as a collective species are being called into our power, back into our heart, back into holistic, right? Back into energetic.
Yeah.
And it just feels, yeah, I really feel that we're the next genre, so to speak, to come out.
I love that. I love that. I love your word you use, sensitives. Because there are people who have judgments, like you said, against the word psychic or mediums. I just had a guest who was conflicted because she is now receiving messages from her transitioned loved ones, and she felt like it was some kind of way of some kind of conflict with her religious upbringing. And I'm just really wanting to use this platform to invite us all to release that hang up, right? And to delve into it and try to see, is this really true? Is this something that God would not like? So we it some kind of way being sensitive has become, it's become a dirty word. So I love you that you said we as sensitives, because that's what it is that we are. We're born with these abilities. We're born with these abilities, and it's God given. So I appreciate that.
100%.
Yeah. So what ways would you like to be contacted? Is there anything else you want to talk about, Sarah, before we log off?
I just, so appreciate you and your energy, and to everybody listening. Again, if you're facing anything that's really challenging or dark, or if you're in that place right now of uncertainty, just know that one, you're okay. Two, you're not alone. And three, this is just now, it is shifting, and it's an invitation again back into self, back into personal
Yeah.
power. And so thank you so much for having me here. You guys can find me at sarahkgrace.com. So that's Sarah with an H and then kgrace.com. I do one-on-one sessions with clients. We have the Grace Place, which is an online community with sensitive people. So if you're working with any of this stuff and just need a little bit more help, or want community where you can talk openly, like that's a great place. Additionally, I'm forming now, it's called Empath X, and we're going towards having a live call-in show, which is going to be super fun. But Empath X is really a real life school for the gifted. And so it will be all automated so that you guys can just be like, okay, if I see stuff, what do I do? If I hear stuff, what do I do? If I, and just really, really, really practical. So we have a lot going on. Plus, my journey into grace is going into television, becoming a scripted television series. So it's like we got a few things happening here. But to me, it's again, it's all of us coming together to support one another. We each have our own unique vantage point, but we're all just individual threads of the collective tapestry.
Mm,
So for us to come together and support one another in, your what we're each up to, and
mhm.
celebrate each other and what we're each up to me, that's how we really win.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And congratulations on that book becoming, you gotta let us know when that happens.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
Things are process. It's going to be a second, but it's definitely we're already contracted for the
Yeah,
beginning.
congratulations on that. That again would be that would be awesome. That would be awesome to see. So I'm going to read you your closing remarks. It has really been a pleasure having you on, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone.
We are all born on this planet with fantastic intuitional gifts and abilities. And somewhere along the way, a lot of us lose these gifts that allow us to perceive beyond the limitations of our bodies. Whether we lose them through fear of being different, or shame from others who do not understand, or from the social conditioning of societal norms, many of us spend the first half of our lives suppressing these beautiful gifts, and the second half of our lives trying to get them back. Though, as painful as it was for you, though, Sarah, you were able to retain your beautiful gifts you were born with. There were many dark days of you wondering what might be wrong with you and why you were so different than everyone else, but no amount of fear or confusion could disconnect you from the divine being of light that you truly are. You have grown to use your gifts to not only heal yourself, but to show others how they can heal themselves and connect with their abilities as well. And this, Sarah, like the Course in Miracles lesson states, this is your part in God's plan for salvation, and your part is essential to God's plan for salvation. Thank you so much for deciding to return in this dimension. Thank you for not only retaining your gifts, but for using them to save lives as a paramedic and to be of service to the collective. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your contribution. We appreciate you joining the show with us, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And we end with the heart. Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. And thank you everyone for listening. And please stop by at Sarah Grace's website. I'm gonna have it in the description block box. Get that book, y'all. Get that book. It's about to be a movie. I can't wait to watch it. I can't. And everyone have a great week. We love you, right?
Bye.
Bye.